Hello students, this is Ms. Dalton, and this section is on bias in statistical studies. Our learning target is that you will investigate bias in statistical studies. So take a moment and copy down these definitions, the different types of bias that you can see. First of all, bias is the tendency of a statistic to overestimate or underestimate a parameter. Undercoverage bias, or you can think of it as exclusion bias, it occurs when part of the population is excluded from the sampling process. So when you're picking your sample, there are, depending on how you are picking your sample, you can exclude a certain group of people, and so you want to be careful about that. A non-response bias occurs when individuals chosen for the sample are unwilling or unable to participate in the survey. Self-selection bias or voluntary response bias occurs when individuals select themselves or volunteer for the sample. So you should never really ask for volunteers because that's going to produce some misleading results. Response bias occurs when respondents are influenced by poorly worded survey questions or by the behavior of the interviewer. So let's look at a few examples. In this first example, it says, suppose two surveys asked Catholics whether contraceptives should be made available to unmarried women. The first survey involved in-person interviews, and 44% of the respondents answered yes. The second survey was conducted by mail and telephone, and 75% of the respondents answered yes. Which of the two surveys do you think was more likely to be accurate? The second survey is going to be the one that is going to be considered probably more accurate. And the reason why is because confidentiality is less ensured in in-person interviews, so people are more likely to lie, especially when it is a controversial topic, as is this one. Our second example, suppose you write two versions of a question for a poll. You can ask people whether the government is spending too much on assistance to the poor, or you can ask people whether the government is spending too much on welfare. Which of the two wordings do you think will produce a higher percent of those saying yes? Why? The word that would produce the higher percent of saying yes is if you use the word welfare. The reason why is because welfare has a negative connotation of consuming taxpayer dollars. If we word it as assistance to the poor, people are more likely to look at that wording favorably. Okay, in these next examples, we're going to choose whether or not we think it is bias, misleading, or neither. So in this first example, the survey result was drinking and driving is not considered a serious problem in Mathville. The method of survey that they used, researchers waited outside various randomly selected bars. They asked every third patron who exited if he or she felt drinking and driving was a serious problem. This would be an example of undercoverage bias. Because people who are strongly against alcohol and certainly drinking and driving would probably not have been in the bars, and thus they were excluded from the survey. Our next example, we have Franklin High School students earn a B in mathematics. The method of survey was that investigators found the mean grade average in mathematics of all students at Franklin High. This would be neither. Whoops. And the reason why this is considered a census, and it does not appear to be self-reported, so the result should hold true. However, the result would be more helpful if it said whether the B was a mean or a median. Okay, in this next example, the survey result was that 90% of U.S. adults rarely use a cell phone. Our method of survey was that researchers called randomly selected homes and inquired as to how often they used a cell phone. This would be considered undercoverage bias again. Since many people who rely on cell phones do not have home phones and would have been excluded from this survey. Okay, another example. The survey result is that 2 out of 3 dentists recommend Tooth Lover toothpaste. The method of survey was that researchers polled 15 local dentists and asked them which toothpaste they would recommend to their patients. This one is considered misleading. Mainly because the survey result generalizes to all dentists, but there is a strong chance that the local dentists are not representative of all dentists. Okay, in this last example, because of its high caffeine content, Jamie and all of his friends prefer Rushing River to either Kooky Cola or Pixie Cola. Explain why Jamie's experience is not sufficient evidence that most young people prefer Rushing River to Kooky or Pixie Cola. If we're looking at Jamie and all of his friends are probably going to like the same cola. And so this is not representative of the whole population. You would want to make a more randomized selection of people if you're really trying to get a good result. All right, here are the problems for this section, and this is just a review over what we've covered so far. You're going to complete this in Moodle, and then right after that, you need to go ahead and take your quiz 8A.